the way I'm kind of looking at this, you know, like a couple of years ago, I saw a piece that was like a prototype that Olympus had done, and then about a year ago, they partnered with Docomo, and they did like a very sleek industrial design version for an event in Tokyo. I can't remember where they showed it at, and it basically clipped onto your existing eyewear. And it was a monocular piece. It's, you know, it's not 3D, but it is transparent. And, you know, and then I see what Google's coming out with Google Glass, or at least what they're sort of showing as this prototype right now. And I look back on what like Microvision was doing, say, 10 years ago in their military hardware, where it obviously didn't have to be concerned about aesthetics. And a lot of the stuff started off as monocular, and then eventually it became binocular over time. And, you know, I would kind of argue that it's not necessarily a debate between one or the other, but that it's the sort of interim solution that would create acceptance among consumers. Hey, this is, you know, this is something that's you look at how similar something that clips on your eyewear is to, say, something like a Bluetooth earpiece, that there's already a certain amount of kind of mass consumer acceptance of that type of accessory, and that this is something that we will evolve into binocular devices over the next few years.
So, yeah, I guess if I may, I think that's one viewpoint, and you're certainly right. There's probably coexistence between the two. That's at least what we have today. You know, we've got, I'm sure we'll see in the very near future, the Google Glass, but you know, that's probably one of the first kind of decent monocular, cool-looking implementations. We've got the Shimadzu and brother kind of scanning laser technologies. Not that I would want a laser in my eye, but and then we have the Epson and Vuzix kind of binocular approaches, and I think today it's not clear yet where that's going. I think in the near term they will coexist, but in the long term there's going to be a kind of standard platform that's going to come in and probably dominate. Again, my view is that's probably going to be binocular because you can do more with binocular. It gives you that compelling 3D story, which monocular can't. You're going to have some eye fatigue probably with monocular because you got the one eye looking out and the other eye concentrating on the content, and there's some, you know, that's probably not super comfortable. Whereas with binocular, that's not going to happen. But again, you know, I'm not.
Yeah, well, I'm more arguing it as a interim solution that will ease adoption when binocular devices get to a point where they're streamlined and aesthetically pleasing enough to be accepted by a consumer.
So we're saying the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, if I might. I think there's actually a good case can be made for both binocular and monocular, and it's one of the reasons that we make both of them. It depends upon the application, what it's being used for. There are many applications where someone wants a monocular unit, such as a firefighter. He goes into a burning building. He doesn't want anything in his way, but there might be a point where he has to see through the camera system for heat sources and things of that nature, where he can flip the monocular display in front of his eye, and it can be out of his way when he doesn't need it. But on the same token, the binocular, if someone's walking down the street, no matter what you do the design, it's still going to have a significant geek factor when you're wearing a monocular unit, versus if you're wearing a binocular that looks to every person walking down the street coming towards you as a regular pair of sunglasses, the geek factor is no longer there.
But I think for that to happen, you have to get to the place where they look like a regular pair of sunglasses. I think that's the gap that we still have.
Obviously, you weren't at CES, or you didn't come by our booth. We announced and displayed the concept models of our smart glass technology. I do have some pictures here if anyone wants to have a look at them after the show, and they do look like a regular pair of sunglasses. The display mechanism that's relatively thick today, as in these, where you've got 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch in the display, that gets shrunk down to a 1.4 millimeter polymer sheet. So now you do have regular sunglasses, and those will be going into production the end of this year or early next year.
Hi there, Greg Panos. I guess the question, Stephen, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. About the eye optic system. You're using a micropolarizer inside the lens. It's like a traditional polarizer. You've looked at notch filters also, haven't you?
Correct.
So the polarizer requires the orientation of the contact lens to be maintained at a horizontal axis, and the notch filter doesn't. Is that proper?
Certainly a polarizer has a direction associated with it,
Right.
and what you'd have to be concerned about is other displays, not the eyewear you're wearing, but other displays in your world also may use polarizers. So
Right.
you'd want to have that in mind when you're setting the orientation of the polarizer that's used within the eyewear. So that's certainly a design consideration. And you're correct that if we don't use polarizer and we use some sort of doping, wavelength-dependent doping, you would not have that issue at all. And there are other approaches. We've identified polarizer as the most straightforward and probably a launch architecture.
And is there any kind of settle time in terms of the balancing or the orientation? If somebody's like actively biking or whatever and they're using one, that it takes 3 seconds or right away or something?
We don't have any data on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a reason to believe it would be a significant issue. We all wear Polaroid sunglasses. You wear Polaroid sunglasses, certain dials on your vehicle, again, depending on how it's designed and how the display on a vehicle is designed, it may dim. So we're used to that, and you adjust accordingly. But certainly a design consideration.
So you have used notch filters?
We've played with notch filters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what are the problems with them right now, do you think?
Availability. I mean, part of what we have to do is create the supply chain.
Uh-huh.
And if you're doing something with filter material that others haven't, then it's a matter of having that filter available to you at a cost and capacity that you require. And so those discussions are underway.
Is the major advantage is in the lack of the needing of the orientation, or are there other advantages?
Yeah, we don't see the orientation as a showstopper by any
Okay.
stretch of the imagination, but certainly cost would be an advantage. It would be very inexpensive to dope a more or less standard contact lens with a chemical that shifted the color of the lens and enable them to do what you're describing, or a coating. You think of a pair of good quality sunglasses might have tens of coatings on the final lens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all well understood as a technology. So it's really establishing an appropriate supply chain.
Now, what if you're using 2 of them for 3D,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to feed alternate images to the 2 displays?
Mm-hmm.
Can you key the filters separately in some way?
I mean, if you had an identical image and it was
Yeah,
just
a right
2D,
eye lens that you always use in the right, and a left eye lens you always use in the left, and the 2 displays were always keyed to those particular orientations.
I
of the
probably don't
lens.
have a good answer for that, so I shouldn't even try.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thanks, no problem. And I can make a comment about monocular very, very briefly. You're sort of stepping into a dialogue that I often have with my colleague, our CTO. He has multiple pair of glasses, so he likes the notion of a clip-on. And he says, gee, I've already got a couple of pair of sunglasses and other glasses, so if I could just clip on, wouldn't it be great? And I think that's accurate and it's a consideration. The other is you're going to reduce the cost of goods, the manufacturing cost, arguably by something less than 50% by having monocular over biocular or binocular. My position, that all said, my position is to set the ultimate spec. And because of comfort reasons that my colleague mentioned, I think that what we're going to do is shoot for a fully binocular, very lightweight, very high performance eyewear. And the eyewear, it's not just the display, but it's the integration of the display and the shape and the texture and the look of the eyewear. So rather than offering a monocular or a clip-on and risk some of that, I do like the idea of a fully integrated, Oakley-like solution.
Given that, you actually touch upon something else I wanted to ask. Have any of you done any work with existing like fashion brands? You know, have you reached out to Ray-Ban or, you know, an eyewear company that has credibility in that space in styling?
We certainly have, and actually it was this particular eyewear company that came to look for us, and because they're interested in the field of, you know, augmented reality glasses. There was two companies actually. One is an eyewear, pure eyewear like design company called Alain Micli, who is a famous designer of eyeglasses, and the other was Essilor, who is obviously the huge worldwide manufacturer of ophthalmic lenses. Oh shit, I'm under NDA with them. Yeah, but it's two different worlds. The overwhelming impression I got was we're talking two different languages with these people. You know, the Alain Micli is talking about, you know, style, and it's a very much an artisanal way of doing things. They take a piece of acetate and they hand kind of form it and fashion it, and you know, and we're talking this language of electronics and displays and, you know, candelas, and you know, it was kind of like woo. And
I mean, don't you think a certain amount of that already happens at eyewear companies when they're dealing with their departments that deal with optics?
It's not the same kind of optics. I mean, these are projection optics, at least I think for us here. It's not ophthalmic optics, and it's a very different thing. I think maybe Stephen is dealing more with ophthalmic optics because he's got the contact lens situation, but you know, again, it's two different optics disciplines, so to speak. I mean, ours is a microdisplay based projection imaging optics. It's not fiber optics, it's not telecommunications, sure. It's not ophthalmic, and
sure,
it's...
Sure, but what I kind of mean is that an eyewear company, and particularly a company that's making you know, correctional vision eyewear versus just say sunglasses.
Right.
That the industrial design department or those that are handling the aesthetic side of the design are still having to collaborate with engineers.
Yeah, and again, it was a slightly different story within Essilor, whereas, you know, they had a team, obviously, that was more technical, that they had hired a bunch of people that were kind of experts in this field. And so we had different discussions with them. But there again, it's not just an optics discussion, it's an optoelectronics consumer discussion. And these guys were like on a different wavelength. So we stopped talking to those people. And we started talking to people in the industry who, I guess our business model is an OEM business model, whereas we're not going to commit suicide by trying to make a finished product, but we're going to just provide that display function that enables that product, that end product to exist, whereas, you know, folks like Sony or LG or Samsung can take what we do and put some ID around it, put the sensors in there, optimize the electronics, build it. I mean, it's a complicated piece of work. There's optics, electronics, very precision mechanics. It's not for everybody, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's a bit of an amateurish idea to think that, you know, you can just come from this kind of vertical world of ophthalmics and be able to make this product, which is kind of what happened. And I don't know if I answered your question.
Okay. If I might just answer a little bit more on the questions asked of Steve about 3D video. Putting 3D into a product such as Steve's is not complicated at all. You don't have to do the left-right field sequential thing. The HDMI 1.4A standard calls for a number of base formats for 3D, side by side and over and under being among them. And those would work very easily with something like Steve's product.
Well, I didn't intend recruiting at this conference, but seeing as you, thank you very much.
Yes, if you would, can you address the kind of trade-offs that you all are looking at in terms of field of view, resolution, and display size?
Wow, I'll let you go first.
Trade-offs, field of view, resolution, and what do you mean by display size?
How large the panel is, or native display you're using for that, your projector?
Well, resolution. For us, we won't launch anything that's less than HD. So it'll be 720p, 1080p, and beyond. In terms of, and that really doesn't get traded against field of view. We call ours panoramic because we're talking 90-degree field of view. So again, our positioning, our fairly unique positioning, is that life for us begins with a huge IMAX quality field of view, about 90 degrees. In terms of the panel, we're talking those 3 to 5 ounce Oakley-like eyewear, and what you've got is a front optic. And remember, ours specifically is a 2-piece system. So you fill that front optic with imagery, virtual imagery, and then your contact lens rolls around. As your eye rolls around and looks at the real world, it now rolls around and looks at this virtual overlay on your eyewear. So you select a small projection or a large projection, a small transparent flat panel, a large transparent flat panel. Whatever you wrap onto the inside of these glasses is what you'll see with our contact lens. So our intent is to decouple those 3 specific items of resolution, field of view, and limitations around eyewear. Thank you.
Okay. The displays that we're doing right now are currently WVGA in our consumer line. We do all the way up to 1080p for some custom products. But starting later this year when the smart glasses come out, those are all 720p. And that's been pretty much the holy grail that everyone's been asking for.
I guess the way I can answer that is it's a cost-performance trade-off that we've made. Again, cost. Cost is king. 720p displays are still very expensive. If you want to make any kind of wireless tethering to that, it's very complicated. It consumes a lot of power. Again, this is our way of looking at things. It's probably not ready today. It's a more long-term thing that we're looking at. Again, based on cost, performance, and form factor, as the field of view grows, at least with our technologies, so does the form factor. The microdisplay technologies today that we're using aren't, at least again, if we're looking at today, I'm not saying we don't have a roadmap, but today they're not ready, they're not small enough, they're not high performance and bright enough for us to be looking at huge fields of view. That's not to say that we don't have a respectable field of view today. Again, I invite you to come and see our demo, and you be the judge. But it's a cost-performance trade-off. We have a very small, very lightweight display, which we call Clearview, which is very low cost. And it's a compromise that we found using today's available technology for microdisplays, using optics that are manufacturable and manufactured today with current technology, not talking about angstrom level tolerances, I'm talking about classical manufacturing technology for optics. So again, cost, performance, it's a compromise and a trade-off that we think we found, at least that's good enough today. How will that evolve tomorrow? Well, obviously it'll evolve in the right direction. It's a display technology. Just like LCDs, we had these huge cathode ray tubes, right, in the past that went to plasmas, then LCDs. Now they're thin, they're HD, large size. Well, we're at the cathode ray tube today. We're at that stage. Remember cell phones? They were in bags, right? People carried them around in the 90s. Well, now they're putting them in their pockets. So that's the same kind of evolution that this technology will go through. We're at its infancy.
So hopefully next year, this audience, half of us will be wearing headsets, but I think it'll be more than a year from now, maybe 2 years, 3 years. What will be the killer app? Why will we be wearing them in this situation? What will we be doing with them? Will we be paying attention to you? Will we be watching what's on our glasses, zoned out? What's the killer app?
I don't know if there's any one killer app that's being defined today, but I think the big thing is going to be the user experience. People today, if you want to do AR, you're basically walking around with your iPhone or your Android or whatever like this. That's not exactly an immersive or a reality experience. Being able to look in a natural way through your glasses, seeing the AR content from a first-person perspective, I think that's where the game is real, where it's a real changer. Not so much as the content. I think there'll be a lot of content, a different type. Sorry to evade your question, but I just don't know if there's a killer app right now.
Maybe I can add to that, and I fully agree with what's been said, but just adding that it's all that stuff. It's a new display platform. It's a new user experience. It's a new product category. What's going to be the killer app? It's all that stuff. It can do all that stuff. Just depends on the technology bricks that we bring together to make the final product. But the exciting thing for me is the possibility exists. And we're at that new frontier.
We're providing the eyewear. It's up to the group out here to come up with that killer app.
Another last quick question about gaze detection and eye tracking. You've obviously all been thinking about it, and in my opinion, it's going to be the predominant way of interacting with these devices. But in terms of distraction, when you're using gaze detection to select menu items and execute other kinds of functions based on eye gestures or movement of your gaze, it does sort of distract you from what you might otherwise be doing. What are your thoughts on gaze detection and distraction and the implementation of gaze detection with your particular designs? Are those going to be something that is going to be a condition of the microdisplay itself, or do you need to pay any kind of special attention to the configuration in order to enable something like that?
Well, in our case, it's part and parcel of our design. It's fundamental. So it'll be very low-cost chipset that's going to tell you where that person is looking and whether they're blinking or whether they're staring or looking off axis, etc. Now, I think one has to add to that voice recognition, gesture recognition, all of the other input, because at the end of the day, this has to be an exceedingly natural, simple interface for the consumer. It's going to be very easy to overwhelm the consumer. And so we have to be careful. And in our case, as my colleagues, my colleague to my immediate right here, we also are a technology enabler. And we're going to look to others, big OEM brands, to work with this portfolio of interfaces and sensors that we will offer. And they will have to make those decisions about I/O, for example. But one has to be careful for reasons you just gave.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Ditto what he said.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so given the look at current battery technology and sort of the near-term 1-2 year future, obviously you leave it up to the OEM to build or you leave it up to the final manufacturer, right, to build a product. But what are you seeing in terms of useful, like, battery life, useful time that you're able to power the display and use the display versus the fatigue caused and how long somebody wants to have it on? Are we at a point where we really can't power them for as long as we want to have them on, or are we at a point where it's like we want to rip them off our head before the battery runs out?
You certainly wouldn't want a product that people would want to rip off their head real fast. And that's the whole notion. This is better be comfortable, natural, exciting, engaging, or it's all a waste of time. And I hear the specification that someone wearing a device, wearing a display is going to want to watch a couple of movies. So that's 4 or 6 hours of life, similar to what you'd have with a cell phone that's operating a movie or playing a movie, something like that. I like the notion of taking a cell and taking off the 4-inch plus display and the battery associated with it, and shrink it down to something that's really convenient, almost like a dongle and part of the I/O, and likely include in that additional space the extra battery. So battery is a big consideration, and yes, battery technology will continue to improve over the next 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 years. But notionally, I'd like to free up space in the smartphone for faster GPU and CPU processing and additional battery to be able to really give you all the time you need with the eyewear.
Yeah, we generally look in products that we're designing at a minimum usage of being able to watch a full movie, so 2 to 3 hours. That's at a minimum. A lot of other products, as an example, a lithium-ion battery pack that comes with a number of our products, that's good for 8-9 hours. So I can sit on a plane to Tokyo, as an example, watch movies all the way, and I never run out of battery power. And they're also USB chargeable, so a lot of the international flights you can just plug it in for the USB's power source as well.
Yeah, just one thing that what I would like to add. Obviously, we're an enabler as well. We have the core technology for the display. So the battery is not something we directly deal with. But what I can tell you is today our monocular display will consume something like 500 milliwatts of power, and that's about a little bit lower than like an iPhone screen. It's about like a BlackBerry screen, something along those lines. But the next generation product we're looking at, again, as these microdisplay technologies evolve, which we're certainly dependent on, will consume 120 milliwatts. So now you've just like basically tripled or almost quadrupled your battery life. But we think, the end game is to have at least a 1 day, a device that can, just like your cell phone, it can be kind of on and used intensively from time to time and still last you throughout the day before you have to charge it. That's kind of the benchmark.
You were recently asked about what are killer apps, which is another way to say, why are people going to want to buy these displays, HMDs? One of the answers to that question that I didn't hear you address is good contextual awareness to filter the information, to personally or hyper-personalize the focus of the information that can be used, that is available to each user. And at that point, then the HMD is used when it's useful and not when it isn't. And that takes the user experience load off of the user, him or herself, and makes the opportunities for information to be displayed much more focused on that individual person. At that point, then there is a method that drives use instead of a killer app.
Okay, so I think I might have missed the point, but or maybe you missed the point that we're not the ones that are creating the apps. That's all these folks out here, and I'm not sure at the display level or at the eyewear level what we can do there. Maybe we can mold it to the guy's head. I don't know, but we don't. I mean, that's not really part of what we do. Maybe Vuzix is different. I mean, they're a little bit higher in the value chain than obviously we are, and maybe my colleague Stephen, but we do not develop any apps. That's up to you guys. Go out there and do it.
I think what's interesting there, you're describing one end of the spectrum, whether you're having the system filter and ensure that the user is safe and comfortable and that the environment is natural. The other end of the spectrum is to have the user incredibly engaged in the experience. So if you think of a video game which sort of extends to a full 3D and fully immersive, where you literally are falling inside that game, the suspension of disbelief, where you're more convinced you're inside that game and Mario is right across the table from you than you are sitting in this room. That happens at about 82, 85 degree field of view, and it happens to be where our design starts. So our thinking in terms of killer app, we love entirely generic eyewear, and that is job number one for us. But as designers, you often have to start making compromises. So the gaming business, we find very interesting. So whether it's sort of gaming immersive inside the world, or whether it's gaming AR, I have avatars moving in my real world, that's an extremely interesting vertical. Certainly, I think for all of us it should be, but certainly for ourselves, I can speak for myself.
I think we have time for one last question. I just saw Ori walk in the room, and now I'm going to... We have one more question. We have time for one last question.
Your questions are always so hard.
Yeah, I know, not him again.
Sorry, guys. Been in labs most of my life. All of your visor-based display solutions are going to require position sensing, inertial sensing at the point of the display. Does everybody agree about that? Otherwise, you're going to have registration problems. You try to diminish reality and everything else, you'll see things that'll be looking like this. If all the inertial sensing is done in a device that's in my pocket, it's not relative to my head. It doesn't localize itself to my head, to my pocket. So you have to have a high degree of sensibility of 9 degrees of freedom or whatever at the point of the display. So as display manufacturers looking into that crystal ball, tell us about your thoughts about looking at inertial displays. I mean, are you going to expect a third party or an OEM to pile that on, or you're just looking at the display problem, or are you looking at it as an integrated solution that maybe you'll consider that as well?
I mean, certainly for us, we're looking at it as a display problem, but you're right in the sense that the tracking, I don't know if it's inertial tracking or computer vision or whatever. If it's a forward-facing camera that's recognizing the environment and adjusting the AR stuff, who knows? But you're right, it's got to be on the glasses. But that's easy, right? That's just putting a sensor on the glasses. The hard part is, what do you do with that sensor?
Yeah, compass, tilt, and accelerometer.
The hard part is, what do you do with those sensors? And that's software behind algorithms that are, smart and doing cool things. It's certainly not what we do.
Yeah, your cell phone, as an example, that's going to tell the user, the application, where you are in the world. But what you're talking about, of course, is what's the relationship between that cell phone and where you're actually looking. And yes, I feel that sensors are required. In fact, that's why we ship a 6DoF tracker with every one of our AR units.
But it's got to be in the glasses, I think
Yes.
we all agree.
Yep.
Because
you have to be able to tell not only where you are, but what direction you're looking at. And you can only do that by having it in the glasses.
And what we like to think of AR as soft AR, along the lines of the Google video, where it's more menus, the location and position are relevant, but they're not down to the pixel, versus sort of pixel precision AR. And what the gentleman's asking for there is the sort of sensors or sensor environment that you'd require to pixel by pixel overlay your virtual over your real world. So I do think probably you'll see more of the soft AR initially, and then as sensor technology improves, costs are driven out, power is reduced, etc. You'll move more and more to this notion of absolute pixel precision AR, where you drop Princess Leia off to the left and it really looks like she's sitting there within your real environment.
Now, beyond sensors, I mean, if you actually want, computer vision-based registration, then you're going to actually have to have cameras.
Fundamental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cameras are cheap and getting cheaper all the time.
I think we'll have a combination of those, but they got to be in the glasses. I mean, that's key. And there's got to be a feedback path, and there's got to be some algorithms behind it. It's kind of, for me, that's a basic notion.
So my question then is a little bit related to that. I've put head-worn displays on everything from little kids to senators, on lots of different head-worn displays. They're all very different. They all have different devices on them, whether they're trackers or different cameras. And you always have to write new software, and you always have to create new interfaces.
Yep.
Are you guys talking to each other at all about what the sort of commonalities are and what the standards might be for how those things connect up?
First time I met him.
Yeah. So
Answers your question.
it's at its infancy, but you're right. We should be talking to each other, and I'm glad we met. And 2 years ago, I remember at the last show that I was at here, there was a kind of, we were trying to get a committee going to establish some kind of standards for what I believe is the key missing brick within our eyewear little world is standardization of I/O. And I mentioned that in my presentation, and that's, and more specifically, standardization of I/O going back to any portable device. Yeah, it'd be great to have everything in the glasses where you don't need a portable device and the thing is like self-sufficient, but we're not there yet. But yeah, there's a huge amount of work to standardize all that stuff going back and forth, and there's nothing today. So you're absolutely right. Every time you got to develop a new interface. Vuzix did it. You know, we're lazy, so we don't want to do it. We just, you know, tell our customers to do it. You know, maybe Innovega's going to do it, but every time you got to develop something new, and that's an issue. You're right. There's no optimization of any of that stuff.
I'd love to see that defined around a smartphone. I mean, it clearly is that mobile device that's
Yeah.
going to be the hub, the server, personal gateway of the eyewear. So that's where the standardization needs to be set. We need to get the Qualcomms and others involved, Intel's involved, in setting those standards for a smartphone wearable combination, I believe.
Yeah, fully agree.
Okay. I think we have to take our half-hour break before our next session now, but if you have any more questions beyond that, I'm sure you can grab our panelist here and speak to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good luck. Nice
Yeah,
to meet
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Nice meeting you too.
Thank you.
Good to see another colleague in the
Another pioneer, huh?
in the